Welcome, Dr. Campbell. How are you today?
It's a pleasure to be there.
It's a pleasure having you. I know you're a fan of Air America, and now you'll be even more of a fan because you're on Air America and imparting very important information related to nutrition and your studies. Your background, you're not an animal activist like I am. You grew up on a dairy farm and have a scientific background, and you've come to some startling conclusions and observations. And how do I get my protein, by the way?
Oh, you get enough from just consuming plant-based foods, vegetables, grains, fruits, legumes, and the like.
Right.
Especially if you're eating whole foods.
Mm-hmm. Well,
that's plenty of protein.
Sure. It's your studies is quite extensive, and you seem to connect America's health problems with our foods. And tell us some of your conclusions and your observations, and what people should know that they don't hear.
We learned that when animal protein is fed to experimental animals, we could turn on cancer development. When we reduce the amount being consumed or replace it with plant protein, we turned it off. I mean, it was really quite remarkable, just the phenomenon of being able to turn cancer on and off. Well, then we studied it in great length over the years and learned a lot about how it worked, and I thought and realized that we were onto something much bigger than just the question concerning protein alone. Eventually, it led us to the idea that animal-based foods were a problem, and it wasn't just the protein; it was everything kind of working together that turned on cancer and other diseases as well.
People would be surprised to hear that you're talking about protein in the negative. Can we spend a little time on protein and why we think it's such a positive? And people always say to me, well, how do you get your protein? Why all the concern about protein, and why are you saying it's something to be avoided and not consumed?
Well, protein has had a long history and a lot of reverence surrounding it. I mean, the name comes from the Greek word proteos, meaning of prime importance, and it was discovered in 1839. And if you go back and trace the history of protein research and the way we thought about it, for the most part, for much of its history, protein was considered only to be present in animal-based foods. So protein was almost equated with meat. And so they're just gathered. I mean, over the years, we believed that we had to consume as much protein as we could get. It was the greatest of all nutrients, and that meant consuming a lot of animal-based foods in order to get the protein. As I pointed out before, we can get enough protein from plant-based foods, especially when we're consuming a combination of all different kinds of vegetables, fruits, and grains. It's not a problem.
Why did people think so positively of protein? Why did they saw?
Well, for one, because it was associated with meat. In the early days, people, I think, tended to think that if they ate all that animal-based food and animal protein, of course, that we could get strength like animals. We could get speed like certain animals. And we could improve, supposedly, our health. What we tended to forget along the way is that there are a number of animals, of course, like ruminants, cows, and the deer and the like. I mean, elephants and hippopotamus, those are pretty strong animals. Right. They don't consume any animal-based protein.
Right. And wasn't it something to do with experiments on laboratory animals in laboratories who grew faster? And was that, some...
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes, definitely. I mean, animal-based protein is much closer to the kind of protein that we have. After all, we're animals, essentially. When we're consuming animal-based protein, we tend to grow faster. But not only do we grow our normal tissues faster, we can grow our cancers faster, too.
Wow.
That's part of the problem. And so we really need to go back and do our homework on this protein question. And we ought to consider it from the historical perspective, philosophical perspective as well. I mean, now we're getting data that really is quite alarming as far as consuming excessive amounts of protein, especially from animal-based foods.
Now, wasn't there some confusion in the nomenclature back then? They called the protein high quality. The animal protein was called high quality, and plant protein was called low quality. Was that something?
Animal protein. I mean, all proteins really are composed of amino acids, as most people know, and they're disassembled during digestion, then reassembled to make their own protein. And it turns out that animal protein has about the right composition of amino acids, so that when we consume it, all those amino acids are right there, ready to go, and we synthesize our own proteins rather quickly. And for that reason, animal protein will support growth faster and more efficiently. that does plant protein. And so in the olden days, much of the early research on protein had to do with figuring out, which kind of protein grew animals the fastest. And so it was really a livestock question for many, many years. And my own background actually was in animal-based nutrition. I came from the farm, so I was quite familiar with all that. And animal protein was considered higher quality because it grew animals faster.
But it's not necessarily healthier.
That's right, absolutely. When I was going through my career, it seemed like to me I was just jumping into one heresy after another in terms of what we thought we believed, and that I've come to believe that really not quite so.
Mm-hmm. We have about a minute and a half before the break, and you'll stay with us after the break. But you want to connect protein to cancer, or where do you want to go with the?
Yeah, well, as I say, we could turn on experimental cancer development just by feeding animal-based protein, and the animal protein that we use, by the way, is the principal protein of cow's milk. That was a hard one for me to accept, coming from where I came from. But the effect was so dramatic, so profound, that, obviously we had to start telling the truth and realizing what we were doing. And the animal protein, as I say, is disassembled into the amino acids, reassembled to make the kind of things we want to make, including one of the things it makes is a growth factor called insulin-like growth factor, abbreviated IGF-1. That is associated with the growth of cancers, now we know.
Okay, Dr. Campbell, hold on for us. Let's go vegan with Bob Linden. We are talking to Dr. T. Colin Campbell, Cornell University, author of the China Study, most comprehensive study of nutrition ever conducted. And Dr. Campbell's background is purely scientific, actually grew up on a dairy farm, and has come to the conclusion that we should consume a plant-based diet. I know that you don't like to use the word vegan because it has a lot of other, considerations to it, but plant-based is what you recommend, and you say it's just a broad range of reasons to come to this conclusion, and the benefits are wide-ranging.
Yeah, they really are. One of the quite amazing things that's in the scientific literature, much of which hasn't been noticed too much, is the fact that a plant-based diet, when properly used, does some amazing things. There's a very broad array of benefits affecting all kinds of illnesses and promoting health in various and sundry ways. It's really quite amazing. And it actually, when used properly, can reverse advanced serious diseases like heart disease and diabetes, and can keep under control diseases like multiple sclerosis, for example. And so what I learned over the years, not only because of our own research, but also, of course, because of the enormous amounts of research that have been done by colleagues, this plant-based effect is whole foods, that's whole plant-based foods, really is able to do all of these things, and we're learning a lot about how it works. And so if we were to eat right, as far as our diet is concerned, and add some exercise, of course, and other things that go along with a good lifestyle, we can have dramatic effects on reducing healthcare costs. And that's an important consideration, I'm sure.
What are the healthcare costs of meat and dairy, would you imagine, on a yearly basis in the United States?
Well, the healthcare costs, I don't know the number, the dollar amount, quite frankly. Well, the best way to sort of consider that question, I think, is to simply point out that I'm suggesting that at least 80 to 90% of all illnesses can be prevented, and in many cases can be reversed and cured by consuming a diet comprised of whole plant-based foods. That's a big number. And so if that translates into savings in healthcare costs, so be it. It's a very big number.
Well, 90% of disease, with that, how many billions or trillions could we be talking about?
That's right. This is one of the greatest stories yet untold, really. Not told properly, at least. Mm-hmm. It's enormous effect of plant-based foods being able to do what they do.
So you don't think people need will need all of the prescription drugs and the surgery and all that comes with the meat and dairy?
Absolutely. We're talking about something where health is maintained by food, not by drugs.